Welcome to The Explainer. A nation isn't just born from documents and declarations. A lot of the time, it's forged in the crucible of battle. So today, we're going to look at a handful of critical military tipping points, moments that didn't just win wars, but literally created the America we know today.
So let's explore this idea, how a few key battles, and maybe just a few nail-biting decisions made under incredible pressure, determined everything, like whether America would even exist and what kind of nation it would end up becoming.
And really, this isn't just about winning or losing, it's about creation. You can think of these battles as the forges that hammered out the nation's entire future. Okay, let's dive in, starting at the very beginning, with the gamble that kicked the whole thing off.
All right, our first stop is 1781. Now, at this point, the American Revolution wasn't just struggling. It was on the verge of complete and utter collapse.
The situation was absolutely desperate. Congress, totally bankrupt, couldn't even pay its soldiers. The army itself was an open mutiny. You had men just walking off the battlefield. And at the same time, over in Europe, the British were pushing for a peace treaty that would have just carved up the colonies, leaving them as this weak, fragmented little state. The dream of independence, it wasn't just fading, it was dying.
So what happened? Well, the genius here was pure deception. The French general Rochambeau comes up with this audacious plan, a long, secret march all the way down to Virginia. This was a massive gamble. And Washington, he only agrees once he gets word that a powerful French fleet is already sailing for the Chesapeake Bay. And that's the key, right? The perfect coordination of land and sea power, all designed to spring this inescapable trap on the main British army under Cornwallis, who had absolutely no idea they were coming.
And man, what a trap it was. When the British Prime Minister, Lord North, heard the news of the surrender, he reportedly just said, "Oh God, it is all over." He knew the war was lost. So this victory, it wasn't just a military win. It completely torpedoed any British plans for a compromise peace deal, a deal that would have left them in control of huge chunks of territory. So Yorktown, it ensured the United States would be born whole and truly independent.
All right, let's jump forward to 1863. The nation is now facing its greatest existential threat yet, a civil war that could literally tear it in two, for good.
So you've got General Robert E. Lee. Up to this point, he seemed almost invincible. He marches his Army of Northern Virginia right onto Union soil. And his strategy? It's basically a knockout blow. He wants to inflict one catastrophic defeat, completely shatter Northern morale, and force President Lincoln to the negotiating table to recognize the Confederacy. The stakes? They could not be higher. We're talking about the future of the United States as one single nation.
But what's so crucial here is the tactical brilliance of the Union defense. General Meade, he chose his ground perfectly. He sets up this strong, fishhook-shaped line along Cemetery Ridge and Culp's Hill. And that gave his army the critical high ground advantage. So after Lee fails to break the flanks on day 2, he makes this final, desperate gamble. A massive frontal assault, what we now call Pickett's Charge, across nearly a mile of open ground, right into the teeth of the Union center. It was basically a suicide mission. The concentrated cannon and rifle fire from the protected Union lines just annihilated the charging Confederates.
The cost, my goodness, it was absolutely staggering. We're talking about a level of bloodshed that's almost unimaginable. But the outcome was decisive. Lee's army was shattered as an offensive force. He would never again be able to mount a major invasion of the North. That was it.
And that victory, it was the mortal wound to the Confederate cause. It ensured that the United States wouldn't be fractured into two rival countries, but would be preserved as one single, indivisible nation.
Okay, let's jump forward again, this time to 1942. The fight now is no longer for the nation's soul, but for its role on the world stage. And America's power in the Pacific, well, it's hanging by a thread.
Think about this. In the 6 months right after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military seemed unstoppable. They had just swept across the Pacific, conquering territory with shocking, breathtaking speed. So this operation aimed at Midway Island, it was designed to be the final crushing blow. The plan was to lure the few remaining American aircraft carriers into a trap and annihilate them.
But the Americans had a secret weapon. And it wasn't a ship, it wasn't a plane, it was intelligence. U.S. codebreakers had cracked the Japanese naval code. Just think about that. They knew exactly where the Japanese fleet was going and what it planned to do. So instead of sailing into a trap, the U.S. Navy was able to set its own perfect ambush.
And the result was just devastating. In a matter of hours, American dive bombers, appearing as if from nowhere, find the Japanese carriers at their absolute most vulnerable moment, while they were refueling and rearming their planes on deck. And boom, they sank all 4 of the fleet's main carriers, the very heart of Japan's naval power. It was a loss from which the Japanese Navy would never, ever recover.
I mean, this one single battle completely flipped the script. The entire momentum of the war in the Pacific shifted, just like that, in an instant. America went from being on the defense to going on the offense, starting that long road to Tokyo and really cementing its emergence as a dominant global power.
So let's step back for a second. When we look at these 3 totally different moments, a coastal siege, a bloody field, a vast ocean battle, what's the thread that connects them all? What do they really tell us about America's journey?
Well, you can see a really clear and powerful progression, right? These weren't just military wins, they were defining moments of creation and identity. Yorktown, it secured national independence. Gettysburg, it preserved the Union as one single nation. And Midway, that established the U.S. as a global superpower with influence all across the Pacific.
It just goes to show you, right? A nation's destiny can be forged in just a handful of critical moments. And that kind of leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. As we look at the challenges of our own time, what are the tipping points that will define our future?